A beginner's guide to Minecraft PvP, how to become a pro.
However, if you want to learn how to survive and perhaps even dominate where the big boys and girls go to play Minecraft, then be sure to watch through this video. This video
Why didn't
will
they
teach
show
you
me?
everything from the basics of PvP to advanced strategic combat. We'll start off by understanding the basic combat mechanics in Java 1.16, followed by basic techniques you won't survive without, and how you can better understand your opponent. Then we'll move on to more advanced combat strategy. Lastly, but most important of all, we'll be going over how you can defeat multiple opponents
At once. This could be helpful for tonight. This could be helpful for tonight,
Before
okay?
we get onto the advanced strategic psychological warfare behind
Holy
completely and
shit.
totally crushing the morals of your opponent, we need to better understand how combat works in 1.16. The 1.9 update shifted combat more towards strategic, well-timed, and accurate hits rather than just clicking fast. This is due to the new mechanics behind critical hits and attack speed. Weapons in updates 1.9 and above now have a maximum attack speed. If you attack too quickly without letting your attack indicator recharge, you will do little to no damage. Swords have a much faster attack speed, but axes do a lot more damage per hit and can disable shields.
So,
critical hits are very important.
I'm guessing axe is better in every scenario for PvP. Well, is it ever better like axe and then you go into sword? Like break their shield and then switch to sword? Or is axe
If you
still
hit
better?
Your opponent while falling, you'll see these particles appear and your opponent will take significantly more damage. Another very important thing to remember is that you can't land a critical hit while sprinting. This means you'll have to stop and sprint mid-air before striking an opponent.
That was always annoying. You can't.
Shields were another combat feature added in 1.9 and are useful in a combat situation. Shields negate all forms of projectile and melee damage if activated while facing.
Well, I know
the
axe does more damage, but like I
an
just
axe
never
can
know like
disable
when
another
the sword
player's shield for up
speediness
to 5 seconds,
comes in handy.
making that player now much more vulnerable to attack. If you do not have an axe at your disposal, you
Use
can
a hoe.
land hits with a sword if you attack from behind, as the shield only blocks damage in the direction that the player is facing. It is also important to note that you are unable to move quickly or use a weapon while your shield is activated. Another combat mechanic you may be familiar with is the momentum reach mechanic. The mechanic has been in place since before 1.9,
Momentum
but is still
reach?
very relevant to combat in 1.16. What is this mechanic, you may ask? Well, the mechanic
I actually
makes
might
it
learn
so that
something.
A player with forwards momentum has further reach than a player moving backwards. This means that a player knocked back by another player's attack will have more difficulty retaliating due to their backwards momentum. This is probably one of the most important combat mechanics to understand.
I don't think I actually
utilizing
knew
it
that.
correctly can allow you to repeatedly land hits on your opponent without them being able to touch you. Now that you understand the basics of how combat works in versions 1.9
This is good.
we can begin dipping
We're
our
gonna
toes
kill
into
everyone
some basic
tonight
combat
with
techniques.
this knowledge.
These techniques make up the basic maneuvers that are often utilized in more advanced combat strategies. The first one we'll be talking about is strafing. Strafing is moving side to side randomly to make yourself a difficult target. However, there's more to it than that. It is essential that you try and take into account your opponent's perspective. You have to try and make your movements as unpredictable as possible. Also, strafing forwards and backwards is effective as well. It is always best to avoid attacking your opponent head-on where they have a fair chance of hitting you. Strafe around them instead. Sprint resetting is essential when it comes to doing the most knockback possible to your opponent. If you hit a player while sprinting, you do more knockback. However, each subsequent hit in a single sprint will do less knockback than the first. The simple solution is to quickly stop sprinting and then start sprinting again each time you hit an opponent. There are multiple ways to do this, but I prefer pressing and
Can we
releasing
be on
the
the server
W
yet,
key
or
while
is it still
holding the
waiting?
sprint key.
I don't
This
know.
is called W tapping. This method is simple and easy to learn. The third and final basic technique is a skill that is not easily taught. Here I'm talking about accuracy. Being able to track your opponent and avoid missing attacks will give you the biggest advantage in a fight. This skill can only really be learnt through practice, but there are some things you can do to help. Firstly, you can turn down your mouse sensitivity. This will make it so that you can track your opponent a lot smoother. You will also need decent desk space for this, as lower mouse sensitivity requires more movement to turn around fully in case your opponent attacks from behind. Turning up your FOV will also make it easier to see your opponent if they are near the edge of your vision. Now let's talk about how you can better understand your opponent and their motives. This can give you an upper hand in any combat situation. Reading an opponent's body language can help you anticipate what they are about to do
Read their
next
body
and where
language.
they're about to be, allowing you to respond accordingly. First of all, we'll be talking about health advantages. This is a very crucial part of PvP in 1.16, as the fight can be determined in a matter of just a few hits. When you start a fight, assume that your opponent is at full health. This is the most crucial part of the fight, and the actions you take here will likely determine the winner and loser of the skirmish.
Yeah.
At this point in the fight, you will want to fight defensively. Fighting
If you start to see them frowning, you know you have the advantage.
Defensive fighting requires a lot more strategy and critical thinking. Your goal is to land the first set of hits on your opponent to immediately replenish their health without allowing them to do the same. More on this later. Pay attention to the number of hits you land, as you can then estimate how much health your opponent has left. This way, you can better anticipate what they may do next. If you successfully depleted your opponent's health at the beginning of the
I don't know.
fight,
I
without
don't
losing
wait.
much of yours, then you
I
have
don't
the
know what
health
else. Was that like
advantage.
the how much damage you do with an iron axe to that armor? Is that what
You
that
can
was?
simply trade hits with your opponent until they die, since they have less health than you. This is offensive fighting. When you are going up against an opponent that's better geared than you, then you will want to fight defensively for most of the fight. Focus on landing hits and evading the attacks of your opponents. There are also many ways you can.
Alright, well that guy's hardly
field when fighting
trying.
a better armed opponent, many of which we'll be going over later in the video, so be sure to stick around. Now it's time for us to move on to some more advanced combat strategy. We'll be going over some
Oh shit! Now this is the juicy things I need to know.
Hand and sword PvP, axe and shield PvP, and combat in the wild. In a sword duel, your objective is to get combos. A combo is when you hit your opponent repeatedly without taking damage yourself. The best way to do this is to combine strafing and sprint resetting to repeatedly knock your opponent backwards while still remaining a difficult target. If your opponent manages to hit you, your momentum will be stopped and your combo broken. Here are a few strategies I like to use to start combos. These strategies are intended for use in sword combat, though some may work well for axe and shield PvP as well. Stab in the back. A simple way to ensure you get the first hits at the beginning of a fight is to attack from the rear. You'll be able to land 2 or 3 critical hits before your opponent is able to respond. Spam clicking. Though spam clicking does barely any damage in 1.16, it can still be a very viable tactic.
Oh, I'll still spam click. Don't get me wrong.
Spam click to hit
I'll
an
do
opponent
it
strafing around you,
if I got
allowing
to.
you to stop them in their tracks and begin to land full hits much easier. The haha you missed strategy. If you see an opponent approaching aggressively from directly in front of you, they will likely attempt to hand a critical hit first thing. Humor them by sprinting towards them, exactly what they want you to do, and when they jump into the air to go for a crit, stop suddenly and strafe back into the side. They will have anticipating where you would have been, so they will miss their critical hit and land harmlessly next to you. You can now sprint hit them with the sword, knocking them backwards.
Then with the quick left to right combo.
Hits. The false health disadvantage strategy. You can easily trick your opponent into thinking they have the advantage by turning and frantically running away. Then, when they least expect it, turn around, step to the side.
But like, assuming they're 1v, I mean, it can be tough to like keep track of someone's health, but I feel like this wouldn't work against someone that's actually very good at PvP, and then like they'll have a pretty good idea of how much health you're at, and they'll just think like, oh, why's this guy? I feel like this isn't even like a false health thing. This is just like a turn around and then hit them kind of thing. It's really not like a false health.
Obi-Wan strategy. Use the terrain to your advantage. Try and get the high ground, preferably on a hill with relatively steep but climbable slopes.
Isn't the high ground worse for PvP? I'll hear him out. Pretty sure high ground's worse.
As your opponent attempts to reach you, knock them backwards, dealing both melee damage and a bit of fall damage too. After landing a few hits, you can use your height to leap over your opponent.
Okay, this wasn't, I guess, totally, I guess ridiculous, but still.
End up behind them and finish them off with critical hits. You may have noticed that most of these strategies utilize an element of surprise. This is because you have the best chance of dealing significant damage to an opponent if you do so before they have time to react. These strategies are most useful in sword PvP. Let's move on to some strategies specifically for axe and shield duels. When starting an axe and shield duel, you can either choose to wait for your opponent to attack or initiate the fight yourself. If you want to bait your opponent into attacking first, face them while holding your shield, jumping up and down. Rapidly click the attack button on your mouse while doing so. This way, you'll instantly hit your opponent as they disable your shield, possibly even landing a critical hit if the timing is right. You can continue
I don't even know.
Rapidly after the first hit to disable your opponent's shield. At this point, you've landed the first hit and both you and your opponent's shield are disabled. However, your shield will be available slightly before your opponent's. If you want to initiate the attack yourself, you can do one of two things. You can try and attack from the side or behind to deal damage and rapidly click after the first hit to maximize your chances of disabling their shield if they try to activate it. You can also try disabling their shield from just barely within reach and then backing away. Now that your opponent's shield is disabled, you have just a few seconds to trade blows before their shield comes back up. I like jumping and strafing around them while landing crits. You can also land normal hits by strafing side to side, forwards, and backwards. Once your opponent's shield is no longer disabled, it's rinse and repeat. We are not done just yet. The previous explanations and strategies assume that you're in a kit PvP situation.
Why is there
Both you
netherite
and your
armor
opponent
like
are
glowing
equally
like all
well-geared
that?
with only the basic necessities for combat. But what if you're in a wilderness combat situation?
There is a
perhaps
chance
on
we're in the
survival
wilderness
SMP?
fighting.
In this case, you may encounter opponents who are better geared than you, and you may also lose your gear, making the stakes of the fight even higher. This kind of PvP is the most important to know, even if your playstyle is not PvP oriented. You could be attacked at any moment, so why not prepare for such an event? The following strategies are very effective ways
Leveling
to
the
level
playing field
when fighting a better armed opponent in the wild. Splash
Yeah, I'm on the
potions are one
server.
way
I'm
of
just waiting
leveling
for
the
it to
playing
load up.
field against a better armed opponent. Potions such as slowness, harming, and poison do damage to players regardless of the amount of armor protection they have. A splash
Did it
potion of
start?
Poison 2 with a 20-second duration will get your opponent's health down to near zero. A splash potion of harming 2 will lower your opponent's health by nearly half, and 2 to 3 will almost certainly kill your opponent. Slowness splash potions will not harm your opponent,
Splash potions aren't gonna help me
instead
today.
make them much less agile
I doubt
and
any
easier to
potions are
hit.
gonna happen today.
Milk can remove such effects, but players wouldn't think to bring milk into combat. You can prevent your opponent from using splash potions by having a bucket of milk in your hotbar,
A
so you
bucket
can
of
drink
milk.
it to rid yourself of any harmful effects. Strength potions are also very useful as they significantly increase the
This isn't gonna help me.
fire, and as a plus, it slows your opponent's speed significantly.
Yeah,
Even
I'm
from
not gonna.
strategies
I think the
that
rest of
may
this is
save
gonna
your
help
life.
me.